I'm back with 60 Miles from Anywhere. It's been a while since I've dropped a travel episode. Because it's been so cold and snowy lately, I wanted to go back to the end of summer when I was traveling around Ireland. Today's episode is about the Wild Atlantic Way and the Cliffs of Moher and the Lisdoonvarna Matchmaking Festival. I hope you enjoy the show. If you like this episode, please check out my website, 60milesfromanywhere.com, where you'll find more stories on my blog as well as insights about creative writing. My fiction is available at amazon.com, and you can find the link on my website to my book, Song of the Cinder. It's available in both trade paperback and ebook for Kindle. It makes a great gift for that lover of fantasy, alternate history, or horror in your life. The whole book is just weird and a lot of fun. Your donation to support this podcast and my website are always appreciated. Click on my Buy Me a Coffee link if you'd like to leave some support. Be sure to leave a rating or a comment on the platform you're subscribed to for your podcasts, too. Ratings and comments help improve my rankings on platforms such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, and many others. I'm also an affiliate with Origin USA, the company that makes boots, jeans, martial arts gear, and even dietary supplements. All this stuff is 100% American-made. Click on the link on my website and use code Harris10 for 10% off your next purchase. I've been wearing my American Bison boots for nearly 2 years, and I never leave home without them. I put them through things that would chew up lesser boots, from climbing up the side of mountains to walking several miles a day in European cities. They work great on the trail, and if you polish them up, you can even wear them to a nice restaurant for dinner. All content is written, recorded, and produced by me, Clinton A. Harris. If you're interested in working with me for podcasting, writing, or other projects, please contact me through the links on my website, 60milesfromanywhere.com. Let's get started. This episode is the Cliffs of Moher and the Matchmaking Festival of Lisdoonvarna. The end of summer feels a long way off. This year has gone by so quickly. At the end of last year, I was making some hard decisions, but I think at the end, they were all good decisions. They allowed me to let go of things that were too painful for everybody involved with, and I just couldn't hold on anymore to some of these things. Ireland was the highlight of my year, and I believe it truly saved my life. I'm eager for the next adventure, too, the next destination. I think on a chilly winter's night, my thoughts return to that place. A place that felt like a home I'd only known from a dream, but felt so real. Somewhere so alien and yet so familiar. I wonder if it didn't resonate with something in my genetic memory somehow. It's a place I get to visit now when I think back and try to color in those already fading memories with a story. The day before my 47th birthday, I drove along the coast of Ireland from New Quay towards the Cliffs of Moher in my rented Opel Astra. I was still trying to get the hang of a right-hand drive, coordinating my arms and legs to work with muscle memory, which hadn't had long enough to develop yet. I would like to think that in the years of driving a stick, it helped with the fundamentals of how to use my clutch and brakes and gas, but everything else felt so weird otherwise. I think all my years as a drummer actually prepared me for having to adapt to this situation. It wasn't just that I was driving on the quote-unquote wrong side of the road. It was that I was having to train my brain to shift with my left hand, fiddle with the radio, keep focused on the fact that a country with so many roundabouts, it was like the Coriolis effect of traffic, because in Ireland, roundabouts go clockwise. Traffic was easier out in the country compared to Galway. It's true that the roads are very narrow, but in a place where so many massive SUVs aren't lumbering around like mechanical dinosaurs, it's all relative. Where Ireland doesn't have giant Cadillac Escalades and Humvees driving around up and down the roads, they do have their share of tour buses, tractors, and even herds of cattle crossing the roads. Out there, the main highways are identified by bumps on the road that they install with reflectors. They go down the middle of the road, and they're also found on the edges of the road. If you cross over, you know it immediately because you'll feel it and you'll hear it. I like this setup better than the grooved pavement in the States and the rumble strips on the edges of the road. It was visual, audible, and you could feel it. It's probably good that Ireland doesn't get a lot of snow, though, because it would not be really great for snowplows. It's true that the roads are narrow, but the speed limits are so low, and the twists and turns along the coast keep you from driving too fast. My little car handled like it was on rails. I couldn't imagine the sloshy response of my Jeep in a place like this, especially when you come up on the tour buses that make your knuckles grip the wheel, and you hold your breath like a submariner in a World War II movie, just watching your rearview mirror for the bus to clear your back bumper, listening to the brambles thwack the other side of your car. I stopped a few times along the drive to take photos of the sea. As I walked, I popped the occasional raspberry in my mouth, crunching the seeds between my teeth for a while. I pulled off the road at a place where a well had been built. Somebody had graffitied inside, "This is not a holy well." The water was cold and euro coins shimmered in the dark structure that had been built around it. I kept on until my stomach told me it was time to eat. I pulled over at a place called O'Donoghue's Pub and picked a seat near the window where I could watch the flat gray line of the Atlantic Ocean through the windows of the pub. The wind was blowing hard, and the chill of the sea was enough to make me skip the safe fare of fish and chips and order up a bowl of seafood chowder. It had started to rain. They had Carlsberg on tap, which was a departure from the Guinness that I'd got in Dublin. So I ordered a pint, and I sat it in front of me until the brown bread and the soup came. I got strange looks from the server, who asked if everything was all right. I told her I needed to put something in my stomach first, or else I wasn't going to be able to drive for a while. My legs still hurt from the last few days in Dublin, walking around the city. The place was clean and quiet, and just a handful of items on a menu on the wall. My chowder arrived, steaming, a creamy bowl served with a small sliced loaf of brown bread. I took a piece of bread and dabbed it into the soup, tasting it, wondering if it was going to be fishy, and had I made a €10 mistake. The flavor was anything but fishy, though by texture I could recognize mussels, crab, whitefish, and small pieces of potato. I used the last piece of my bread to sop the bowl clean and drank my Carlsberg beer as I watched the ocean. Each striation of the foam line inside my glass marked the passage of time until the last gulp. I paid and left. My legs felt better than they had all week. The wind had died down a bit, and the sun was shining on the ocean. I kept driving down the coast, with the familiar limestone mound of the Burren on my left. At first I hadn't thought much of the stark landscape of piled rock that sloped upwards from the sea, but as I drove, something about it became more and more beautiful to me. I could see the ghosts of 3 islands in the distance, which I knew to be the Aran Islands. My plan was to take the ferry from Galway in a day or two and explore these islands. A method of deciding where to visit when I travel is to pick something to do. In this case, it was to buy a sweater, and I was going to use that as a goal. It's kind of like throwing a rock and then following that rock wherever it lands. The destination is always something small, and the journey is the adventure I have along the way, trying to get there. I stopped at a sea cliff not long after O'Donoghue's and walked out along the stone ground, trying not to twist my ankle in the ruts, which I later learned were called clints and grikes. Tiny tufts of flowers grew up from the bottom of the grikes, getting their sustenance from the damp breath of the sea spray. The waves crashed against the cliffs, giving me vertigo as I got close to the edge, and I dared to take pictures. The water had to have been at least 100 feet down. The crash of the ocean was immense, and it filled the air with like a rumble. The rest of the coast unwound towards my destination for the day, the Cliffs of Moher. I passed through villages, minding the roundabouts, listening to music from my iPhone that synced right up to the car's stereo system. My navigation was quiet most of the time, warning me about different roads to take, and if you blinked, you would miss your turn and find yourself doubling back, crisscrossing the Burren, and getting lost again if you weren't careful. For the distances between these places being so short, the twists and turns took a while to navigate. I stopped off at a woolen mill shop to rest for a bit. In the last couple of years, I've developed an appreciation for Irish cable knit sweaters. Even on the coldest days in my Colorado mountain home, I can stay warm wearing my cable knit sweaters I ordered online. Here I found an entire store with sweaters, tweed hats, vests, and blankets made in Ireland. I waffled for a while about which one I wanted to buy. The nice young lady working at the shop chatted with me on and off, telling me to take my time. Her accent identified her as an American, and so we started visiting. She'd been living in Ireland since the beginning of COVID, having moved there for college with her boyfriend. She's still working in the shop mostly, and she complained about the cost of fuel, but says she's fallen in love with the place. She told me that she had problems with her work visa, but hopes to get to stay for a while longer, until they can get permanent residency, once her student visa runs out. I continued to be indecisive about which sweater I wanted to buy. A hand-knit cardigan from the Aran Islands for 180 euros, or a machine knit for 80. I eventually settled on the cheaper sweater, knowing I have to stretch my budget over the next week. And I still wanted to buy a new flat cap. I was still thinking about where else I might go or see, and the woman at the shop was right about the cost of fuel being so high. She told me about different trails and spots to check out near the cliffs, and I might be interested in taking those hikes too. They're off the beaten path, and not a lot of tourists know about them. The names are hard to remember, and I was starting to lose the light. The cliffs would only be open for a few more hours, and there's still another stop I wanted to make before I went home for the night. In a small town on the coast is a place called Lisdoonvarna. Each September, there's a matchmaking festival which attracts tens of thousands of visitors from around the world. It was a Friday, and the festivities were just starting for the weekend. When I told the shopwoman about this, she got excited and said that a friend of her mother's met her husband at the festival a few years ago. She told me that they were both in their late 40s and had been carrying on like teenagers since they met. We talked briefly about the train wreck of online dating. I said I just wanted to visit and potentially write about it. So far, I still haven't had any takers on the pitch. I thanked the nice young lady and started driving again. Irish radio kind of lost its novelty because Queen Elizabeth II had just died, and though I hadn't heard anybody in Ireland say anything about it yet, the radio DJs were making up all sorts of comments about how people had mixed feelings. On one hand, everybody's favorite grandma had died, and on the other, the reign of a notorious colonizer who signified the decline of an empire had passed on, shuffled her mortal coil. Some people were cheery about that. I didn't know what to think, and I just decided not to get involved in anything like that. Mixing that in with the old Spice Girls and Snow Patrol songs that they played on heavy rotation, I just decided to play what I had on my phone. Everyone seemed to be mellow about it that I met in person, but it was kind of sad to see things like TikTok, where people were like chanting Lizzie's in a box and all this other stuff. It really kind of clashed with the actual vibe of what was going on in the country with the real people that were around. Nobody was out in the streets singing "Come Out, You Black and Tans" or anything like that. People were just living their lives like they always did. I arrived at the Cliffs of Moher and pulled into a spot in an unpaved parking lot. The cliffs I had seen before didn't prepare me nearly enough for what I was about to see. The Cliffs of Moher are nearly 1,000 feet high, with wheeling seabirds being the only thing for miles between you and the ocean. A visitor center talks about the cliffs and how they were formed. At certain times of the year, the place is thick with puffins, but they had already headed back out to their feeding grounds in the Atlantic. I'm grateful for the bathrooms and the low cost of admission, but everything is still set up for COVID, even though nobody was wearing masks. The nearly forgotten relics of social distancing, like the marks on the floor and the signs everywhere, and hand sanitizer stations nobody was using, were old reminders of something that was still so near, yet seemed so distant in time. A row of gift shops waited outside the visitor center, and people filed in and out of those, buying anything from sweaters to charms and rings, Jewelry, hats, mugs, the usual tourist stuff. Like the sweater shop, you could have everything shipped back home for a low price. I still have my sweater in the car. I wanted to keep it and wear it around. I wanted to actually be able to say, yes, I wore this sweater in Ireland when I was a visitor there. I don't know. I'm a goof about sweaters. I just love them. I didn't used to. I used to hate wearing the things. Always just scratchy and confining and too hot. But here, they just kind of seem to fit. They fit perfectly. I don't even really know what that means. It just didn't seem out of place, I guess. Though you can tell the tourists by the people that are wearing flat caps and cable knit sweaters most of the time. It didn't bother me, though. After going to the visitor center, I hiked up to the top of the cliffs, which are cordoned off with stone slabs erected as a fence all along the trail. Everybody has the same picture, standing next to the wall with the southern cliffs in the distance. I followed the path, and I climbed up to the top of a stone tower to take photos through tiny window slits, before continuing on along the ribbon of trail. On one side are pastures with grazing cows and sheep, and on the other is a drop of several hundred feet, with the ocean continuing to claim land every day for itself, like a hungry monster. I thought of my dog and how she would have loved watching the cows and sheep. I say, "Look, Penny, cows." I wondered how she was. Probably getting spoiled at my parents' house, eating table scraps and sleeping on the couch with my dad. A group of college-aged boys ran past and raced to the end of the trail, and as they passed, I said, "Enjoy your knees while they last." And they laughed. Along the way, I kept passing and getting passed by a couple. A young man with a thick neck and a short haircut, accompanied by a young woman about his age in a white denim miniskirt. Her hair was bleached blonde and her lipstick was bright pink. As they hiked up the trail, she had to mind the hem of her skirt as she walked. He was always walking a good 30 yards ahead of her. They would stop every now and again, and he would give her an impatient look. I suspected they were on a date since some of those stops included making out at different points along the trail. I turned back, knowing I had only a few miles in my already aching legs left for the day. The couple had turned back earlier, and I passed them again on my way back to the car park. By now, the shops had all started to close, and the parking lot was emptying out. I set my navigation to Lisdoonvarna and started driving. This little town was nearly as crowded as Galway when it came to traffic. I circled around and around until I found a place to park on the main street. I had to congratulate myself on my ability to parallel park there. Nobody else cares, but I think I did a great job. I walked around Lisdoonvarna with greater expectations than the advertisements delivered. Old gray men in button-down shirts and matching young men walked around in clusters. A few young women in garish dresses or tube tops and micro miniskirts stood chatting with each other in front of the pubs. Many of the hotels were booked and off-limits, as they were apartmented out for Ukrainian refugees. The participants of the festival looked like kids in a middle school dance, avoiding each other. As usual, everyone was either very old or very young, and here I was, stuck right in the middle. I ordered a burger and chips at a food truck for dinner, and visited with the cook for a bit. He told me that this year's turnout was much worse than previous years. I went on, enjoying a geriatric version of watching college kids in Old Town Fort Collins. I sat down in front of a pub which was across the street from the corner store. It was there that I met Mammy Michaela and her husband Patty. They were glamping with their grandson David and had been up from Cork. Patty was gregarious and social and couldn't walk 10 feet without making a new friend and chatting with them for the duration of his lager. Michaela kept her eye on David, who was only about 7 or 8. He roamed all over the park, threading his way through the people who were starting to converge for the live music inside the pub. Michaela was the only person throughout the whole trip who talked about the Queen. She told me that she had a good sob for her that morning, but was better now. She was English and had met Patty 40 years before. They'd gotten married, had a daughter, and by the sounds of it, they had David most of the time now, living in Northern Ireland. Patty and Michaela couldn't have been more different. Paddy kept goading her with a mischievous twinkle in his eye, saying that he was going to go to the traveler's van to get his fortune read. Michaela looked apprehensive and almost fearful at the invocation of the supernatural. She said something about curses, but I pretended not to hear. The travelers were getting a lot of customers at the matchmaking festival, more than likely looking for love in their future. Michaela asked me if I believed in any of that kind of stuff, and I told her that I had a friend who had done a tarot reading for me just a few months before, and how it was very accurate. Depressing and heavy, but accurate. There wasn't much I could do about any of it, so I decided just to not get involved with the occult anymore. Sort of a tell me something I don't already know thing that didn't bother me either way. Michaela seemed equally horrified and fascinated. Paddy went back for another round. When Paddy came back from hanging out with a few more friends, he had a fresh pint in his hand. He told me about how he had heard that the host of the matchmaking festival would take people's €30 each, put their names in a list to match everybody up. But instead of matching everyone up at the end of the festival, he would chuck the whole book into the ditch and never actually do anything, just kept the money. We both laughed a little too hard at that. Though the festivities were starting to pick up, I decided I didn't want to be on the roads at night. I would be 47 tomorrow, and my night vision wasn't getting any better. I probably should have stayed, since I read a news report back in the States a few days later that a couple had been caught having sex on a public balcony that night during the festival. The crowd below had been cheering them on. Nothing remotely that exciting was going on when I was there. I couldn't help but wonder if they were in their early 20s or the late 60s crowd. It's probably good I left, though, because on the drive back, I was getting really tired. I found myself driving on the wrong side of the road in one village and getting honked at by other drivers. The way back was shorter, mostly along the N67, cutting my trip time in half from how long it took to get out there. Looking at a map, it's only about 60 miles, but the driving time is a lot longer than an hour. At my Airbnb, I tried on my sweater and I was happy. I still wear it all the time. I'm wearing it right now as I record this. It has been perfect for these cold winter nights, and with my leather jacket, it's as good as a Columbia jacket. I decided I didn't want to go to the Aran Islands anymore. Maybe I figured I could have looked out the window of the shop where I bought the sweater, and I saw the islands, and that was good enough without a €50 ferry ride. I would drive up north along the coast instead and visit Sligo, and then go on to Mallinbeg and the Sleeve Cliffs the following day. Right now, the snow is getting deeper outside. We've had a few snowfalls in the last few days. It's strange, almost spring snow where it gets kind of slushy, and it freezes and it's bitter cold at night. But the sub-zero temperatures have stopped since Christmas. I miss the green and gray of the grass and rock along the coast of Ireland, the surging ocean against the sea cliffs, the little villages, the way the light is constantly changing on the coastline of the wild Atlantic Way. One of these days I will go back. Days like that pulled me further and further from those dark portents the cards had revealed. I missed people I had lost along the way a little bit less. I filled the empty places in my heart with new experiences in a strange, beautiful land, with amazing people. The people I met along the way kept showing me that I was open to meeting new people, and that I was actually likable. I couldn't figure out what had nearly convinced me otherwise over the last year. Sometimes it's good to just step away from your own bullshit for a while and get some perspective. I'd started to see things in a whole new light, and the world was once again opening up to me. And that's it for tonight. I wish I was in a place that was green and beautiful and warm again, but I have the patience now to let that kind of simmer and set my sights again. Have new adventures with new people, and I'm just excited about the whole thing. 2022 was kind of a wash, but it had its good moments, and it had enough to make me look forward to 2023. I hope you have a good new year, and hope to have you listening some more. Tell your friends.